Hello guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Adora, and if you're just joining me on this channel for the first time, thank you very much for stopping by. So there's this debate that has been going across for a while right now about ending the postgraduate study visa or continuing it or what have you. And at the moment, it's like the Home Secretary has actually given into the at the moment, it's like the Home Secretary has actually changed her mind about stopping the postgraduate visa route, which is a good thing. But on the other hand, I was thinking, what if she had she decided to go with it? What if she decided to continue the decision? What if she didn't change her mind and she insisted that once you're done with your degree, you find your way back to your home country? What if that had happened? Now, why I'm coming up with this very issue is because of recent, I have heard and I have seen I've heard a lot of stories, and I have seen some people who came into the country through different visa routes, especially the work visa route and there's study visa route. I've seen quite a few people who said, or rather who have shared their challenges, their struggles about coping, about surviving, about managing here. Like, it's not what a lot of them actually expected. It's not what a lot of them actually thought they were going to see. It's not what a lot of them actually imagined they were going to go through. And when I spoke to some of them, a huge number of them actually gave different reasons. Some of them were very quite personal reasons, while some were kind of general reasons such as that it's kind of a boring, depressing place. You know, the weather just keeps you kind of static. It keeps you lonely, especially when you don't have a family. Like if you don't have a family here, you feel the loneliness, the boredom. You just feel all by yourself. And that kind of rakes in depression at some point, because it takes a very strong person, honestly. It takes a very mentally strong person to survive living in a cold environment, especially when you don't have family, you don't have friends, you just all this to yourself. Concerning the kind of people who have shared their stories with me, and some of them who have actually relocated back to their home country. So recently I was talking to a girl, she is actually from Sudan, and she was telling me that, listen, that she cannot just cope, that this is not like it's not what she dreamt of, that she's actually seeing, that there's just too much going on for her. That's ranging from the weather, the cost of living, the jobs, she mentioned so many things. I was like, so what exactly is it about these things that is the problem now? She said, well, the weather, we all know, yes, that is kind of depressing. And she coming from kind of a warm region to this place, she's not used to it. The thing is beginning to affect her mentally, is beginning to create some sort of loneliness, and then create some sort of home feelings for her, like she's beginning to miss her home. And then secondly, the fact that the course she actually came to the UK to read, she actually feels she can't get a job with it, because it's not like one of the courses that it's not one of the courses that is in vogue. Like, it's not one of the courses that is actually a priority when it comes to job placement. That if it were to be other courses, maybe like nursing, IT, or maybe engineering, yes, she would have, but she's kind of finding it a bit hard to take in the fact that even after her studies, she's not been able to get a job. There's been so many complaints, a lot of things I have heard, a lot of people I have seen that have said they want to go back, but some of them is because of the shame. They feel kind of ashamed to go back home. They feel like they're going back home to nothing. Some of them have actually sold off all they have. They have actually disposed all of their properties, their belongings, just to travel. And this brings me to the point of this video. Like, when I see people who say they sell off all they have, they sell off their cars, they sell their houses, they shut down their businesses and all of that to relocate abroad for either work visa or for student route. Yeah, it's fine when you're trying to gather money, especially when you don't have money to make your plans. It's okay when you're trying to do all this to gather money to get yourself prepared, but is it really advisable to sell off all you have? No, I personally don't think it's advisable, especially when you're moving to a country where the rules and regulations of visa change from time to time. You're going to a place where the laws regulating visa processing, the laws regulating immigration, the laws regulating and affecting different kinds of visa routes can take different turns from place to place, from time to time. You might not know when you're back home that these laws actually change, that these laws can be favorable at one point and at the other point it's not. You might not know, so I won't beat you to that. But the fact is that things happen, laws can change. Okay, look at recently, they were trying to scrap the postgraduates, the postgraduate visa stuff. Like after you come to the UK for school, you are eligible to stay for I think 2 years to work, and if you want to renew your visa or move into a different visa route from there, you are free. But right now the plan is to cut that 2 years, cut it down straight to 6 months, just to enable students to round up their education and go. So the main summary of that whole visa thing is just to indirectly stop students from overstaying after their education, after their studies. They want them to go back home. But like I said earlier, the Home Secretary at some point was being challenged about that decision. So I think it's made her make a U-turn. Now she has cancelled that idea and she just left it. Okay, fine, everybody continue with your 2 years postgraduate stuff. But what happens after she leaves and someone else decides to come in with a different agenda, with a different immigration rule concerning that particular route? What happens in future if a different immigration minister decides to come in and say, okay, well, if you're coming in with work visa, you will only be allowed to work in a certain sector throughout your visa permission, throughout your visa allowance in the UK. Let us assume, for instance, now they are opening a visa route that says, okay, we're looking for cleaners, and these cleaners, you have a visa route open for about 5 years, so which means for 5 years you will only be allowed to work as a cleaner all through your stay in the UK. You cannot change to another field, you cannot change jobs just where you are, because that's the route in which you came through, and that's what you must abide by. What if at some point, yeah, it can be very interesting when you're coming, I don't mind cleaner, I'm going to the UK, but after you come in, what happens when you feel, no, I don't think I want to be a cleaner anymore, I want to change jobs? And at that point, you're finding it difficult to get a job because your visa doesn't permit a change of job. When you now start getting frustrated about the whole thing, when you start getting uncomfortable and unpleasant about maybe the whole thing, the inability of you to get something else, and you can't actually change your visa. And it will surprise you to know that I have seen somebody that actually packed her things and left the UK just because she said she cannot work in the care sector anymore. She came with the care, healthcare visa, the work tier visa route. She came through it. But at some point, she said she cannot continue, that it's too demanding and too stressful, and it's not what she expected. Like, she didn't even know what the job of a carer is. Sometimes they just paint these things so flamboyant and flashy online, so people don't really know the main thing, like the main responsibility of being a carer. So she didn't know there's still a lot to do with it. She thought being a carer is all about serving tea and coffee and biscuits, and she didn't know that there were some other things that you had to do, and those other things you had to do were actually the things that put her off the job. So she said to me, since she's not able to change the job, she wants to go back. But good enough, her own case is exceptional. Good enough, her company back home decided to take her back in. Like, they were like, okay, fine, if you decide to come back to work, your space is there. But what happens to other people who are not opportune to go back to work in case they decide to go back home? This brings me also to the point that I don't think it's reasonable to sell off your assets if you have any, back home because you want to relocate. For instance, if you have a house in your name, it's your own property. If you have a house, if you have a business, and you have a car. Now, out of these three things, which will I be able to sell if I were to be in the shoes? Like, which of them do I think I can just dispose to travel? Yeah, it's the car, because the car is a liability. It's not in any way going to bring me any profit or bring me any interest or whatever. I am even the one spending to maintain the car. So I could make do with the car, sell off the car to move. My business, since I won't be there in person running the business, it might suffer a setback, because sometimes it's assumed that when you are not there, especially if it's not really a very, very huge business that does not need your presence, if it's kind of a small business that needs your presence, and you are not there at that time to take control of the business, I think you should just let it go. But for the house, I don't advise anyone to sell their house. Why? Because that's a huge asset. Asset in the sense that it brings you money, one. Secondly, it's a major source of accommodation. It provides, roof over your head. In case of anything, just in case you decide one day, I can't cope again, I need to go back home. Or just in case the laws of the country doesn't favor you in the long run, and you decide you want to go back home, where will you stay? So that's why I think it's not necessary to sell off, it's not necessary to strip yourself financially back home because you want to relocate. If you have some other means of, getting that done, that's fine. But there's some things that I think should not be thrown away, should not be discarded because you want to relocate. Also, I've noticed that a lot of people, once they get that visa, especially the work visa, once they get that visa, they don't read the other part of the letter or the other part of the document that states that after a period of time, you will be required to renew your visa. So they just take up the visa and they run off. They're excited, they're traveling out, and that's it. It's only when they come into the UK that they discover that, wow, so after, for instance, the visa is for 3 years, they're like, oh, so after 3 years, I'm supposed to renew my visa to remain in the country, to get something a little bit more permanent, to remain in the country. And this renewal would require some money because it's not going to be free. And then at that time, people now begin to think, oh, it requires money. And when they make their calculations, they're like, wow, is this the amount of money I will have to spend or I have to pay to renew these things? These fees are exorbitant. They are expensive, especially if you have a family. Now imagine at that time you are paying for let's say for instance you have 2 children, you, your wife, or rather your husband and your 2 children, you're paying the NHS surcharge, you're paying every other, you are like, just bear it in mind that at the end of the day you should be holding like about 12 to 15,000 pounds to renew it. Now some people might say, well, it doesn't matter as long as you're going to get something more permanent. Fine, it doesn't matter. But what happens at that point when either you cannot afford it or you now start, because I have actually seen someone who was now saying, wow, that money would go a long way back in her home country. She would prefer to spend that money or to invest in that money back home than to spend it and then renew the visa, and still the circle of, the stress and the discomfort she has been telling me and complaining about continue. So it's actually something you should think about before you make that move. Is it worth it wrapping your life up there? Is it worth it selling off everything you have and moving? Is it worth it shutting down that chapter of your life back home to relocate abroad? Think deep about it.